In today's biased news, banks collude with fossil capital, Ukrainian drones hit Moscow, and the coup in Niger faces stiff opposition. In the most unsurprising news of the decade, banks that are involved in accounting for carbon emissions in bond or stock sale underwriting voted to exclude the counting of said emissions from their own carbon footprint, which they're legally required to report. For PR purposes, many major lenders have agreed to becoming carbon neutral by 2050, but in light of the vote, will be responsible for as little as 30% of the emissions generated from their activities. In total, 2/3 of the emissions from the capital market business will be intentionally omitted from carbon accounting, thus reducing the total reported environmental burden of these transactions by the involved banks. Interestingly, no such exception was made for regular loans, which banks are already legally responsible for emissions-wise. To no one's surprise, nearly 50% of all financing for major fossil fuel companies comes through capital markets, not direct lending. This establishes a direct link of interest between fossil fuel companies and their banking allies against environmental legislation. The excuse of the banking sector is that it might reduce profits long term, as capital market-related emissions will be much larger than standard lending-related emissions. Regardless, even if 100% accounting were required, all parties involved would split up their strategies and find loopholes, which the banks themselves stated in the confidential talks. Various UN and other NGO organs have discussed whether this or that accounting method will correctly assess climate impact for banking activities, but they miss the fundamental point. If a business refuses to comply with something that concerns the future of the species, then maybe they shouldn't be allowed to have autonomy in this decision. Only nationalization and proper accounting on a basis of social utility can adequately secure the changes that need to be made. But that option goes strictly unmentioned, and is never on the table because the capitalist system is built by and for the ruling class, and for never-ending profit to the detriment of the planet's ecosystems and the rest of us. In Ukraine war news, according to a senior official in Kyiv, Saudi Arabia is preparing to host a summit to discuss Zelensky's plan for peace amid the ongoing war with Russia. So far, no official date has been set for the meeting. Additionally, 3 Ukrainian drones hit the Russian capital of Moscow on Sunday. Moscow is about 500 kilometers from the pre-2014 Ukrainian border. Tensions remain high between the combatants, with neither side willing to budge and both using increasingly threatening language. While the final outcome of the conflict remains uncertain, it is clear that it only benefits the ruling class of all involved nations. In the latest move of Ukraine's cultural counteroffensive, the leadership has chosen to remove the hammer and sickle from the country's well-known Motherland Monument. This is, of course, yet another gesture to pander to the American crowd and their never-ending crusade against communism, even if that means erasing the country's proud history of resistance against fascism. The world waits with bated breath for the inevitable arrival of Walmart, Burger King, and a giant statue of Ronald Reagan. A Wagner military exercise in Belarus has triggered warnings from Poland that Russia is deliberately trying to destabilize the border region. Heightened border tensions between Poland and Belarus have led to a dramatic fall in visitor numbers to one of Poland's traditional tourist attractions. Poland sees the presence of Wagner forces as the latest in a series of provocations orchestrated by Russia. Last week, a coup took place in Niger, with the coup leaders claiming that the toppled government had authorized France to attack the presidential palace in an attempt to free the deposed president. France, Niger's former colonial ruler, has condemned the coup and urged the reinstatement of President Bazoum, but they did not announce any intention to intervene militarily. The Presidential Guard, responsible for the coup, had previously warned against foreign attempts to extract the president, threatening violence and chaos if such attempts were made. To pressure the coup leaders, a regional bloc has imposed strict sanctions, including suspending all commercial and financial transactions between its member states and Niger, as well as freezing assets in regional central banks. These sanctions could have a severe impact on Niger, one of the world's poorest countries, heavily reliant on imports from Nigeria for up to 90% of its power. Niger's political history has been turbulent since gaining independence in 1960, facing several coups and attempts to overthrow the government. And in positive news for the day, India and Bhutan have announced a significant increase in their wild tiger populations, according to new figures released separately by the two countries. India recorded an average total of 3,682, making it home to 75% of the world's wild tigers, according to the Minister of State for Forest, Environment, and Climate Change. Meanwhile, Bhutan recorded 131 tigers, up 27% from its last count in 2015. The new figures coincide with International Tiger Day, and this year there's cause for celebration. That's all for today. We'll be back day after tomorrow with more news. If you'd like to see longer episodes with more in-depth analysis, consider becoming a patron so we can grow and expand.